Where would James Bond be without the women who helped define his legacy? For decades, the so-called Bond girl has been one of cinema's most recognizable and controversial roles. At times, these characters have been reduced to little more than glamorous distractions with outlandish names. But at their best, they've outshined 007 himself, bringing sharp wit, bravery, and depth to the screen. As the franchise has evolved, so too have its leading women, transitioning from fleeting companions to powerful allies. Still, not every performance has aged gracefully, so today we're diving in to rank them all, from the forgettable to the unforgettable. Some picks might spark debate, others may surprise you, but one thing's certain: the number one spot is undeniable. Mary Goodnight, the man with the golden gun. When it comes to the long history of Bond girls, few have sparked as much frustration as Mary Goodnight. Introduced in The Man with the Golden Gun, she stands out for all the wrong reasons. Instead of being a strong, clever partner to 007, she's remembered as the woman whose sheer incompetence almost got him killed. From the moment she appears, mishaps follow. At one point, she even gets herself locked in a closet while Bond is off seducing another woman. A scene that underlines just how unhelpful she really is. The supposed intent may have been comic relief, but her clumsy antics come across as irritating rather than entertaining. Even Bond himself looks visibly exasperated by her constant blunders. The most infamous moment arrives when she accidentally activates Scaramanga's deadly solar-powered laser, using her backside. Incredibly, she does this not once, but twice, putting the world's greatest spy directly in the line of fire. In the end, Goodnight feels less like a Bond girl and more like a parody character who stumbled into the wrong film. Aside from looking good in a bikini, she brings little else, making her a low point in the Bond legacy. Christmas Jones, The World Is Not Enough. The World Is Not Enough had the potential to be one of the boldest Bond films ever made. The original idea was to set up Sophie Marceau's Electra King as Bond's main love interest, only to later reveal her as the true villain. It was a daring twist that could have reshaped the formula, but instead, the film retreated back into familiar territory. Rather than ending with Bond facing the fallout of betrayal, the story suddenly introduced Dr. Christmas Jones, a nuclear physicist who became the last-minute Bond girl. Her arrival feels abrupt. She is first encountered in Kazakhstan, and after being rescued from an explosion, she begins tagging along on Bond's mission. While her technical knowledge is essential to understanding the villain's plan, the way she is inserted into the narrative makes the shift feel forced. The ending then falls back on tradition, closing with a sudden romantic scene that clashes with the darker, more serious tone of what came before. The real issue lies in the casting. Denise Richards, with her youthful look and Valley Girl delivery, never convinces as a scientist. Instead of elevating the film, her character undermines its impact, leaving the impression of a wasted opportunity. Stacey Sutton, A View to a Kill. Stacey Sutton, introduced in A View to a Kill, comes from wealth as the heiress to a California oil empire. But she isn't just another socialite. She's also a trained geologist, which puts her directly in the crosshairs of Max Zorin, the film's villain. Zorin's obsession with acquiring her company shares drags Stacey into endless legal battles that drain her finances and leave her vulnerable. While her background sounds promising on paper, Stacey has long divided Bond fans. Many argue she falls into the same trap as characters like Christmas Jones, looking too young and delicate to be fully believable as a scientist. Still, she manages the role with more credibility than Richards did years later. The bigger issue lies in her on-screen pairing with Roger Moore. By this point, Moore was in his late 50s, older than Tanya Roberts' own mother, and their romantic dynamic often comes across as awkward and unsettling. Behind the scenes, tension between Roberts and Moore reportedly added to the lack of chemistry. On screen, Stacy's tendency to scream in distress grated on some viewers, overshadowing the moments where she genuinely contributed, especially in the finale. Ultimately, audiences left remembering Zoran's henchwoman Mayday more vividly than the supposed leading lady. Cara Malavi, The Living Daylights. Cara Malavi holds a rare place in the Bond franchise as the sole Bond girl of The Living Daylights. Unlike most 007 films, which usually introduce 2 or 3 women to share the spotlight, Cara had the entire stage to herself. On paper, that should have set her up as one of the most memorable Bond characters. Yet her role turned out to be far less impactful than expected. After her early scenes, Cara's presence in the story quickly loses weight. Aside from being manipulated into drugging Bond on behalf of the villain, her involvement barely connects to the main plot. For much of the film, she becomes little more than someone for Bond to rescue, sidelined rather than developed into a meaningful partner. Performance also played a part in the disappointment. Mariam Dabo's attempt at a Russian accent fell flat, and the lack of chemistry between her and Timothy Dalton left their romance feeling hollow. Even Cara's more adventurous moments bordered on unintentionally comical, like the infamous scene where she tries to fly a plane, completely unaware that she is steering directly into a mountain. With clear skies ahead, the mistake felt less like tension and more like a missed opportunity, cementing Cara as one of the weaker Bond heroines. Plenty O'Toole, Diamonds Are Forever. Plenty O'Toole is one of the strangest names to ever appear in the Bond universe, and somehow it guaranteed her a place in pop culture history. Yet, when looking at her actual role in Diamonds Are Forever, the hype feels completely unearned. She appears briefly at a Las Vegas craps table, clings to Bond in a failed attempt at seduction, and follows him back to his hotel room. Within moments, she's tossed out of a window and lands safely in a pool. That scene could have been her exit, but the film oddly brings her back only to reveal her lifeless body floating in Tiffany Case's pool. An event never explained and left hanging without purpose. What makes her stand out isn't any depth of character or contribution to the plot, but rather a campy name and the way the camera lingers on her. Lana Wood's performance, unfortunately, lacked the spark needed to elevate the role, especially when compared to her sister Natalie's celebrated screen presence. In the end, Plenty O'Toole didn't move the story forward or build any real chemistry with Bond. Still, she remains etched in memory, proof that sometimes a name alone can be enough to cement a legacy. Rosie Carver, Live and Let Die. Rosie Carver is one of the more unusual figures in the Bond franchise, remembered less for her skill and more for how disastrously unqualified she seemed for the role she was given. On paper, she had the makings of something special. As one of the very few black Bond women in the series, her presence was groundbreaking. Yet her actual execution in the story left audiences puzzled. Introduced as an MI6 field agent, Rosie quickly reveals another layer. She is secretly working for the villain Kananga. Her mission is straightforward: seduce Bond and lead him to his death. The problem is that Rosie never once feels like a capable professional. Lacking confidence at every turn, she comes across more frightened than dangerous, constantly trembling as if she knows she is in over her head. Despite her nerves, Rosie does manage to spend the night with Bond, and even attempts to set him up for an ambush. But her double game collapses almost immediately. Instead of pulling off her mission, she ends up executed by Kananga himself, killed by one of his bizarre voodoo-inspired contraptions. Rosie Carver remains a rare and notable Bond girl, though remembered more for wasted potential than true impact. Paris Carver, Tomorrow Never Dies. Paris Carver in Tomorrow Never Dies is one of those attempts by the Bond franchise to force a love story that never quite works. The producers clearly wanted audiences to see her as a figure from Bond's past, hinting at some deep connection that places her alongside Tracy DiVincenzo. the one woman who truly changed Bond's life. But the comparison only highlights how thin her character really is. Unlike Tracy, Paris is never given the time or development to make her presence feel meaningful. Her sudden reappearance in Bond's life is treated as if viewers should automatically invest in her fate. The script leans on implication rather than building an actual relationship, moving quickly from a supposed history to a rushed affair, and then to her predictable death. The tragedy the filmmakers seem to want simply doesn't land, because nothing about her character earns it. Adding to the problem, Terry Hatcher's performance feels detached, as though she herself was never convinced by the material. Paris Carver ends up as another recycled trope, the villain's wife who falls for Bond and pays the price. Instead of leaving an emotional impact, her character feels more like an afterthought. Magda, Octopussy. Magda is one of those Bond women who begins with tremendous promise, but ends up almost forgotten by the film itself. Introduced in Octopussy as a mysterious and acrobatic figure, she immediately brings intrigue and danger to the story. In her early scenes, she feels like someone who could stand alongside Bond as a true player in the plot. Her moments are unforgettable at first. She shares an intimate encounter with 007, reveals her small octopus tattoo, and then executes a daring gymnastic escape out of his window, Fabergé egg in hand. It is the kind of stylish, over-the-top sequence that cements a character in the Bond universe. Yet once Octopussy enters the narrative, Magda all but disappears. She drifts into the background, appearing only as part of fight scenes or as one of Octopussy's followers. Stripped of the presence she had at the start, by the film's second half, her voice is gone, her agency erased, and her potential wasted. While she could be dismissed as little more than a henchwoman, her early impact suggests she deserved much more. Magda's arc is a classic example of a character who began with fire, but was overshadowed and left behind by the story itself. Miranda Frost, Die Another Day. Miranda Frost in Die Another Day is the kind of character you can see coming a mile away. With a name like Frost in a Bond film, it's obvious she's meant to be the cold, untouchable woman who eventually betrays 007. The film leans into the tired stereotype of the frigid woman as villain, presenting it as if that alone counts for character development. Her role in the story is straightforward, but uninspired. Frost is introduced as an undercover MI6 agent, posing as the publicist for Gustav Graves, a flashy playboy who is secretly one of the franchise's most over-the-top villains. Since Graves' circle clearly hides a mole, and Frost is the only MI6 presence nearby, the revelation of her betrayal comes as no surprise. Yet the script plays it as if Bond and the audience should be shocked, despite how obvious it is. The larger problem is that the movie itself is weighed down by campy dialogue, endless puns, and a plot that borders on self-parody. Still, Rosamund Pike manages to give Frost a certain edge. Her performance hints at the stronger, more nuanced roles she would later take on, even if this particular outing leaves little lasting impact. Lucia Ciara, Spectre. Monica Bellucci made history in Spectre by stepping into the role of Lucia Ciara at age 50, becoming the oldest woman ever cast opposite James Bond. That milestone shattered the record set by Honor Blackman's Pussy Galore more than a decade earlier. Bellucci even pushed for the more fitting title of Bond Lady, underlining the maturity and presence she brought to the part. Her Bond debut was a long time coming. She had been considered for roles during the Pierce Brosnan era, but those opportunities went to other actresses with bigger names at the time. In hindsight, she may have dodged a bullet, as some of those films struggled critically. When she finally joined the franchise, producers promised a more layered female character, and on paper, that sounded like a major step forward. The reality, though, was different. Lucia Ciara ended up feeling like a recycled archetype. serving mainly as a stepping stone for Bond to get the information he needed. Yet, there was one small twist. Unlike past conquests, Bond actually spared her fate and handed her an escape route. Despite just 10 minutes on screen, Bellucci's presence hinted at untapped potential that the film never fully explored. Kissy Suzuki, You Only Live Twice. Kissy Suzuki might not have a lot of screen time in You Only Live Twice, but she brings a spark that makes her stand out. Her big moment comes with one of the strangest schemes in the entire series. She fakes a marriage to Bond to help him blend into a quiet Japanese fishing village. The logic of that plan may be questionable, but it certainly adds flair. What really sets her apart, though, is that even on their so-called wedding night, she keeps Bond at arm's length, insisting he sleep on the floor rather than share her bed. That makes her a tougher sell than Aki, who had an easier romantic dynamic with 007. Beyond the marriage ruse, Kissy shows practical skills too. She's a strong swimmer and proves her courage when she runs for help at a crucial moment, handling danger with determination. Eventually, the inevitable happens. She does end up with Bond, though not until the closing credits roll. In the end, her role is limited to the film's final act, and her name isn't even spoken on screen, appearing only in the credits. Still, her spunk and independence leave more of an impression than many of the forgettable Bond girls. Melina Havelock, For Your Eyes Only. Melina Havelock from For Your Eyes Only stands as one of the most underrated women in the Bond franchise. Played by Carol Bouquet, she brought a mix of elegance, intelligence, and deadly determination that set her apart from so many others. While her name doesn't always appear in conversations about the most iconic Bond characters, her role deserves far more recognition. What makes Melina unforgettable is her personal mission. After her father is murdered by a powerful Greek businessman, she sets out on a relentless path of vengeance. Her pursuit eventually collides with Bond's own investigation, creating a partnership filled with tension and purpose. Unlike many women who fall into the background, Melina carried a quiet intensity that threatened to outshine Bond himself. The strength of her character came not just from her beauty, but from the emotional weight she brought to the story. She wasn't a simple sidekick. She was a driving force, a partner with her own motives and edge. Armed with her signature crossbow and fueled by grief, Melina proved herself as one of the most compelling figures in the series. Even without delivering the final blow to Christatos, she remains a standout presence, leaving a lasting mark on the Bond legacy. Mayday, A View to a Kill. Grace Jones's Mayday stands out as one of the most unforgettable figures in the Bond franchise. While many Bond women blend into the background, Mayday made sure you never forgot her. With her striking androgynous beauty and bold 80s style, she brought a presence that was both glamorous and menacing. She wasn't just another accessory to Bond, she was a force, a henchwoman who could take control of a scene with sheer intensity. Her loyalty to Max Zorin, both as his lover and assassin, defined much of her role, but her true power came when that loyalty was betrayed. After Zorin left her to die in an explosion designed to wipe out Silicon Valley, Mayday refused to be just another casualty of his ambition. Instead, she switched sides, helping Bond move the bomb out of harm's way. In one of the film's most dramatic moments, she sacrificed herself, riding the explosive to her death in a final act of defiance, making sure Zorin knew she had the last word. From parachuting off the Eiffel Tower in a cape to dispatching enemies with blow darts, Mayday was larger than life. Campy or not, she remains a Bond girl no one can ignore. Paloma, No Time to Die. Ana de Armas lit up No Time to Die as Paloma, even though her role was far shorter than the promotional material suggested. She appeared everywhere in the posters and trailers, yet her screen time was surprisingly brief. Still, those few minutes were enough to make a lasting impression. Paloma works almost like a playful parody of the classic Bond girl formula. She arrives in a glamorous setting, looks incredible, lends Bond a crucial hand in his mission, and then vanishes from the story. The difference here is that the film knows exactly what it's doing with her. By leaning into that trope with a wink, it turns Paloma into pure fun. Casting de Armas was a masterstroke, especially since she already shared natural chemistry with Daniel Craig from their time together in Knives Out. What makes her so memorable is the way she blends comedy and action. One moment, she's fumbling with nerves like an inexperienced agent, and the next, she's dismantling enemies with breathtaking skill, all while maintaining effortless elegance. Paloma is in on the joke, but she's also a force to be reckoned with. That mix of charm, humor, and power makes her short appearance unforgettable. Tatiana Romanova, From Russia with Love. From Russia with Love built on the foundation of Dr. No and raised the bar for what a James Bond film could be. Sleek gadgets, high-stakes espionage, and the unforgettable train fight made it one of the franchise's most celebrated entries. Yet within all of that action, Tatiana Romanova often doesn't receive the recognition she deserves. Portrayed by Daniela Bianchi, Tatiana was more than just another Bond companion. She was the blueprint for what would become a defining pattern in the series. She begins as an adversary, drawn into a mission against Bond, only to be swayed by his charm and ultimately fall for him. This dynamic, which would later repeat across countless films, took shape with her character first. What sets Tatiana apart is the authenticity of her connection with Bond. Unlike many fleeting romances, their relationship feels layered and sincere. Her mix of vulnerability, allure, and danger helped set the tone for future Bond women. And who could forget her bold entrance, slipping into Bond's bed wearing nothing but a black lace choker? That moment captured both her daring and her elegance, solidifying her as one of the franchise's standout figures. At the heart of a great film, Tatiana's presence elevated the story and left an imprint that continues to echo through Bond history. Jinx, Die Another Day. Halle Berry's Jinx shines as the rare highlight in what is often remembered as one of the weakest Bond films, Die Another Day. While the movie itself has become infamous for its over-the-top excess and poor execution, Berry brought an energy that cut through the chaos. She was introduced as Bond's equal, and she delivered on that promise with toughness, confidence, and a sharp sense of humor. Jinx was bold, unapologetic, and in full command of her presence, whether trading barbs with Bond or diving headfirst into action. What makes her role all the more striking is how she embraced even the clunkiest dialogue, managing to give the character life in a film weighed down by its flaws. In another context, with a stronger script, Jinx could have easily stood as one of the franchise's most celebrated allies. The potential was clear enough that producers even planned a standalone spin-off centered on her adventures. That project never materialized, largely because of the backlash surrounding the film. Still, Jinx remains a reminder that even in one of Bond's lowest chapters, a compelling character can emerge. Both Halle Berry and her character deserved far better than the movie that surrounded them. Solitaire, Live and Let Die. In 1973's Live and Let Die, Jane Seymour's Solitaire stands out in a franchise that often sidelines its women. On the surface, she may not have much screen time or agency, but what sets her apart is extraordinary. Solitaire is a tarot card reader working under Mr. Big, who is eventually revealed as the villain Kananga. Unlike most Bond characters, she possesses genuine mystical powers. She can actually see the future. In a series built on gadgets and espionage, this supernatural edge makes her feel almost like a superhero dropped into a spy thriller. But of course, Bond being Bond, that power doesn't last. Once Roger Moore's 007 seduces her, Solitaire loses both her virginity and her abilities. It's an unfortunate trade-off that leaves her more vulnerable. But even then, Seymour's performance ensures she remains unforgettable. From the very first meeting with Bond, she commands the scene. When the secret agent draws a tarot card labeled The Fool, she delivers a sharp verbal jab, holding the upper hand. Moments later, when the Lover's card turns up, her shock feels completely real. Combined with her striking look and elegant costumes, it's Seymour's commitment as an actress, not just her beauty, that makes Solitaire linger in the memory. Pam Bouvier, License to Kill. Pam Bouvier brought a different kind of energy to the Bond series, a sharp reminder that the women in these films could be every bit as tough and capable as 007 himself. From the moment she appeared, she wasn't just along for the ride, she was a force, and it was unforgettable. Of course, there were a few moments where the character leaned into the familiar Bond tradition of romantic swooning, but those scenes pale in comparison to her standout moments. The barroom fight alone secured her place in Bond history. With a shotgun in hand, blowing a massive hole through the wall, Pam proved she wasn't anyone's sidekick. That scene remains pure cinematic gold. Actress Carey Lowell gave Pam her fire and presence, creating one of the most memorable roles of her career. Even after stepping back from Hollywood in the 2000s, she valued the character enough to return and voice Pam in the 2012 video game 007 Legends. Pam Bouvier's appeal went beyond beauty. She carried a lethal edge that demanded respect. She wasn't content to stay on the sidelines, and her mark on the franchise has endured as one of the most iconic examples of a Bond woman who could truly stand toe-to-toe with James Bond. Anya Amasova, The Spy Who Loved Me. Barbara Bach's Anya Amasova stands out as one of the most capable women James Bond ever encounters. Operating under the codename XXX, she belongs to the rare group of Bond women who match him in skill, intelligence, and presence. Throughout the film, she pursues the same mission as Bond, and even manages to outmaneuver him on several occasions. Her sharp wit and determination make her feel like a true equal rather than a side character swept up in Bond's world. One of her defining moments comes during the chaotic van escape from the steel-toothed villain Jaws. As he tears the vehicle apart, Anya fights to get them to safety, only to be bombarded with Bond's smug commentary on her driving. His condescending remarks, paired with that trademark grin, make the scene all the more frustrating. Yet, it is Anya who saves the day, using her quick thinking to crush Jaws with the van and secure their escape. Despite her promise to avenge her lover's death by killing Bond once the mission ended, Anya ultimately sets aside her vow and falls for him. Still, her strength and presence leave a lasting impression, one that could have easily carried her into her own spin-off adventures. Wai Lin, Tomorrow Never Dies. Michelle Yeoh's Wai Lin in Tomorrow Never Dies is one of the rare Bond women who doesn't need the script to insist she's an equal. She simply proves it through action. From the start, she establishes herself as a capable, resourceful agent. Disguised as a reporter, she slips into the villain Carver's inner circle with ease, a move far more convincing than Bond's own attempts at espionage. Later, she demonstrates her strength in unforgettable fashion, dismantling an entire gang of thugs in Saigon without hesitation. What makes Wai Lin so compelling is how naturally her competence shines. She doesn't boast about her skills or demand recognition. Respect comes to her because of how effortlessly she handles every challenge. Her dynamic with Bond only adds to her charm. She playfully brushes off his romantic advances while asserting her independence, never once coming across as forced or exaggerated. Instead, her insistence on working alone feels authentic, placing her on Bond's level rather than beneath him. When she and Bond finally team up to take down Carver, it feels earned, an outcome built on trust and mutual respect. Even the eventual romantic payoff avoids cliché, making Wai Lin a standout figure in the Bond legacy. Pussy Galore, Goldfinger. Pussy Galore, introduced in 1964's Goldfinger, and played by the late Honor Blackman, is remembered for one of the most infamous names in the Bond franchise. While earlier characters like Honey Rider carried suggestive undertones, Pussy Galore's name was far more blatant, which is unfortunate because the character herself was far from a joke. She was a force of her own, confident, skilled, and entirely capable of matching James Bond in both intellect and determination. As a pilot and leader of an all-female flying squadron, Galore broke new ground for Bond women at a time when the series rarely allowed them such authority. She outsmarts Bond more than once, even catching him in the act of spying. And for much of the story, she remains immune to his charms. That resistance made her stand out even more. Though the infamous barn scene later softened that independence, in a way modern audiences find troubling. Even then, Galore retained her confidence and never became disposable. Without her eventual help, Sean Connery's Bond would not have succeeded. She proved that female characters could be more than fleeting distractions, setting a precedent for stronger, more independent Bond women in the years that followed. Honey Rider, Dr. No. When people talk about the most unforgettable moments in cinema, Honey Rider's entrance in Dr. No always makes the list. Played by Ursula Andress, she wasn't just another character. She defined what it meant to be a Bond woman. That scene of her walking out of the ocean in a white bikini while Sean Connery's 007 watched from the shore didn't just catch Bond's attention, it changed movie history. From that point on, the idea of the Bond girl was born, and Honey Rider became the standard by which all others would be measured. But she was far more than a striking image. Honey had a determination and an edge that made her stand out. She carried strength, resilience, and danger beneath the surface, proving she wasn't just there to be admired. That mix of beauty and deadly resolve helped cement her as one of the most memorable figures in the franchise. While Connery and director Terence Young gave James Bond its international launch, it was Ursula Andress's Honey Rider who shaped the role of women in the series. Every Bond woman that came after her has been compared to her, but few have matched the iconic mark she left. Tracy Bond, on Her Majesty's Secret Service. When it comes to unforgettable Bond women, Contessa Teresa Tracy Di Vincenzo holds a unique place, brought to life by Dame Diana Rigg in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. She wasn't just another addition to the long list of Bond companions, she was something entirely different. Rigg gave Tracy depth, complexity, and humanity, turning her into one of the few women in the series who felt like a fully realized character rather than a collection of familiar tropes. Tracy's journey carried a wide emotional range. She moved seamlessly from moments of vulnerability and desperation to bursts of joy and determination, making her presence feel authentic to the story. She was also capable in ways Bond's partners rarely were, even taking the wheel in a rally car sequence that turned a chase into one of the film's most thrilling highlights. Yet her greatest impact came in tragedy. After becoming the first woman James Bond married, her life was cut short in a devastating drive-by shooting. That moment not only shaped the ending of the film, but also haunted the franchise itself, with later Bonds still acknowledging her memory. Tracy Bond became the one loss James could never truly escape. Vesper Lynd, Casino Royale. Casino Royale shifted from being a strong Bond entry to a truly legendary film the moment Vesper Lynd stepped onto the screen. Played by Eva Green, she wasn't just another striking presence opposite Daniel Craig's newly minted 007. She became the spark that redefined the franchise. Their first meeting on the train remains one of the most finely written and performed exchanges in Bond history, with sharp dialogue that instantly set the tone for their relationship. What made the scene unforgettable wasn't simply the clever words, but the way Vesper read Bond with precision. She dissected him piece by piece, his military background, his charm, even the disdain with which he wore his perfectly tailored suit. In doing so, She became the first woman who truly matched him in intelligence, wit, and presence. For once, Bond wasn't the only one in control. That foundation made his eventual love for her not only believable, but essential to the story. Their bond felt emotionally genuine, in a way no previous romance in the series ever had. Even with her eventual betrayal, the chemistry between Craig and Green was undeniable. Vesper Lynd didn't just challenge Bond, she reshaped him for a new era.